So once again, a very good evening and a warm welcome to all our guests, architects, engineers, students and key partners who have joined us today both online and on ground for our second webinar series on the Ultratech India Next initiative for 2021, Build with Speed. It was indeed very reassuring and encouraging to see that this webinar series is drawing an overwhelming participation from both online and on-ground audiences. And we hope to have this continuous support from the fraternity in helping us achieve the dream of good quality housing with speed being of essence, as demonstrated by our first speaker, Mr. S.J. Vijay, and summarizing for a few audiences who were not able to catch that session. He spoke about built spaces which are transitioning from being static to become dynamic, responsive, intelligent, functional systems for live work, production, storage, and retail. This transformation, driven by the demands of the urbanizing world and enabled by a bouquet of technologies, are increasing the extent of manufacturing in making the building. The key objective behind IndiaNext platform is to facilitate the knowledge exchange amongst the community through inspiring work done by industry mavens who have been and are contributing significantly in the domain matching the competition theme Build with Speed. You'll see a lot of them through this webinar series, and I'm sure that's going to be enriching for all our audiences. The Thought Leadership Initiative will not only reach greater heights through significant contributions made by each one of you from the cement industry and the building and construction fraternity at large. As India's #1 cement, Ultratech will always be at the forefront of such initiatives and continuously strive to be the change leader. The final test for any promising change is putting it to test and checking whether it can deliver at least one of the large immediate opportunities. I think I've spoken enough, but I think I've set the context beautifully. And without leaving any more workspace, it's time to now invite my first guest for this evening. He's a change leader in the technical space in both the B2B and B2C segments for urban and rural segments. Let me invite Senior Vice President and Head of Technical Services, Ultratech Cement, Mr. Satyaki Sarkar. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause for Mr. Satyaki Sarkar.
Let me now introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Anil Sone, who works for the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, that's RICS, as a global leader of the construction and infrastructure sector. He's involved in producing the construction and infrastructure sector's body of knowledge, standards, practice statements, education, and training. He has a rich mix of academic, research, industry, and consulting experience in the US, India, Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia. In 2020, he co-authored a book entitled Construction 4.0, which is innovation platform for the built environment. In India, he has been involved with HFA, that is the Housing for All technical submission, lighthouse projects. He's very passionate about technology, and he has been working relentlessly to mitigate the global housing challenge. May I now request Dr. Anil Sane to take us through his presentation.
So I had talked to you briefly about the $1.6 trillion that we lose because of some practices that we have incorporated in our sector. The productivity gap, if we are able to make changes and improvements, we are, as a sector, globally likely to save $1.6 trillion a year. Asia Pacific itself could be $440 billion per year, every year savings if we improve our means and methods of construction. The sticks and bricks approach, which we all know has numerous challenges, a lot of rework, a lot of waste, such as this you're seeing on the screen, cannot really continue, because if you have to accomplish the goals set by India in terms of housing units needed, this traditional sticks and bricks approach would not work. As a sector, we must transform and modernize ourselves. This call for modernization has been a constant calling. It is there to meet the demands of the society. If you have to build so many housing units and other horizontal and vertical projects and assets, there is clearly a need to enhance and improve the way we work. The sector itself faces numerous challenges. We have fragmentation within our sector that needs to be addressed also. So, to me, that really translates into transforming our sector. The transformations that we need in our sector, I divide them broadly into three. We need to relook at, reconsider how we construct or fabricate. When I say that, I also mean how we design, how we construct. So we need to relook at that process itself. We also need to enhance the way we develop and use digital technologies in our sector. And simultaneously, we must also address how we procure and deliver, because any transformation in design, construction, use of digital technology must also be simultaneously led by improvements in procurement and delivery. So, is this the answer? Can we continue to tinker and have incremental improvements? Can we have a gold plated wheelbarrow and assume that our productivity gap would change? We will improve our sector holistically. I don't think that's anymore the answer. We have done all the jugaad and the incremental improvements in our traditional way of working. We must now undertake a much broader and holistic improvement as a sector. And I think that this competition, the IndiaNext challenge, is brilliantly poised to help us rethink. You get a canvas, a fresh drawing board on which you can take some of these ideas, perhaps not all that I'm going to share with you, but some of these ideas, and put them into practice, come up with an innovative, creative idea that creates a sea change and makes the improvement in design, construction, in digital technologies, and in procurement and delivery that we need as a country. So, what's happening? This is not something that's happened all of a sudden to us. In a way, COVID has played a significant accelerator in the use of technology for our sector. In the past 2 years, we recently did a, not so recently, about a year or so ago, we did a survey in which we found out that because of COVID, on-site productivity further dropped by about 11 to 20%. So if you talk to anyone, because of site closures, reopening of sites, safe distance, and many other health and safety measures that are very much needed, have led to some drop in productivity, some drop in supply chain, material prices have increased, and many other challenges have been compounded for our sector. So, what we have done brilliantly, I feel, all over the world as a sector, have quickly transformed and adopted sort of these modern methods of construction, adoption of digital technologies, and really started making a good, significant progress. We are seeing, I'm sitting in the DC area, Washington, DC area, we are seeing rapid deployment of digital technologies such as this one, a hard hat or a helmet with sensors that can predict and project and tell you where the worker is. Are they maintaining safe distances? Are they horizontal? Have they taken a fall? All those things can now be done using technology. There are now artificial intelligence applications taking place all over the job site to do computer vision as well as image processing to make decisions, especially related to worker health and safety. We are seeing virtual inspections take place where physically the inspector does not need to be on site. You can use a laser scanner, 360-degree video to actually inspect the site. And this was happening, but I think the acceleration is significant. Coincidentally, I found a report which is pre-COVID, and Balfour Beatty talked about how in 2050, likely there will be no humans on the construction site. I'm not sure if I'm completely bought into that idea, but you get the point that we will have lots of remote work that could be done, robots deployed, and other kinds of technology and automation deployed on our sites. So from a very sticks and bricks approach, already the journey towards a much more modern way of working, adopting a new operating system is already underway, and we are seeing great examples of that take place. So in order to fully understand this transformation, we have come up with this terminology called Construction 4.0. It's a paradigm or an operating system that views the three transformation that I talked to you about earlier on, get connected in a much more holistic fashion. So essentially what we are saying is take what the other sectors are doing, Industry 4.0, adopt and adapt that to construction, and we are calling this as Construction 4.0. You can call it industrialized construction or any other similar term. What Industry 4.0 does, it is essentially a confluence of trends and technologies that promises to reshape the way things are made. So it just changes how you produce various widgets and products. Can we take that high level thinking, adopt and adapt it to construction, call it Construction 4.0, so that we can rethink how we design and construct, how we use technology, and how we procure and deliver? So our definition of Construction 4.0 is that Construction 4.0 is a paradigm that uses cyber physical systems, which is also now called digital twins, and the Internet of Things, data, and services to link the digital layer consisting of building information model and a common data environment, and the physical layer, which is essentially your asset that you're constructing, but you consider that physical layer or that asset over its whole life, to create an interconnected environment integrating organizations, processes, and information to efficiently design, construct, and operate assets. So in short, what we are saying is Construction 4.0, what is it? It is a paradigm or an operating system. What does it use? It broadly rests on two technologies. One is cyber physical systems, and the second is Internet of Things. How does it work? It works by connecting your digital layer, which is your BIM model or any other virtual representation of the asset that you're building. So during design and construction, a model, connect it to the physical layer on site. Initially, during design, there will be nothing there. The physical layer is still not existing, but as it starts coming off the ground, and you connect that physical layer with the digital layer. What does it do? It helps connect organizations, processes, and information. Remember, lots of deficiencies and inefficiencies in our sector come from project teams not being integrated, data not being shared, information not readily available, and processes being fragmented. So what does Construction 4.0 do? It helps connect organizations, processes, and information. How does it help? It helps you rethink design and construction and digital technologies and its use to improve design, construction, and operation of built assets. So that's our working definition of Construction 4.0. So the framework itself is such that you have two layers, as I just talked about, the digital layer and the physical layer. Physical layer you can think of as a construction site. Today, we are already using deployment of numerous technologies on the construction site. The physical layer will utilize many things, including robotics and automation, wearable sensors by our construction workers, other kinds of IoT devices and sensors. You can have additive or 3D manufacturing, prefabrication, and all what I call physical technologies available and deployed on the construction site. So over the life of the project, you have nothing on the ground, then things start coming off the ground. That's your physical layer. That physical layer is utilizing many of these physical technologies that I just listed and gives you much more control over what's actually happening on the construction site. On the top, you have your digital tools such as your AR, VR, big data analytics, your cloud-based production management tools, all kinds of digital tools that can help you in during the design, construction, and in fact, after handover commissioning, all your operation, maintenance, renewal, and end of life stages as well. Sitting in between is the digital layer. This is the digital assets that you're producing during the design and construction. You could start with maybe a building information model or any other virtual representation of the design of that asset, stored perhaps in a cloud-based common data environment, and slowly people shifting towards the use of digital twins as well in the digital layer. So these three layers are interconnected and are helping shift the way we design, we construct, and then hand over, operate, maintain, renew, and end of life or our built environment assets. So that's sort of the graphical representation of the framework. The framework itself would utilize model and data-centric work practices. We'll use platforms and ecosystems, and I'll explain further on what these platforms and ecosystems are. And then people and processes, which have basically the fundamental layer of any operating system that you want to have for construction, because without people, no matter how much technology you deploy, really you can't make a difference. So keeping that as the foundational layer of people and processes, the Construction 4.0 framework essentially helps you move in the direction of build with speed and bring about very important changes, much needed changes in the sector. So you may be thinking this is all sci-fi. I think maybe not many of you would be thinking that, because some parts, some technologies you're already using. But more importantly, you will see that the recognition of this in a recent article by IIT Guwahati director, that why can't construction, architecture, civil engineering that helps shape our society and act as an economic engine for our nation, why can't we be at the forefront of using IT, robotics, AI, and IoT? Why can't these tools and technologies be used to build the basic infrastructure, the social and the economics infrastructure for our society? So that tells you that we are already on this journey of utilizing these technologies. What I present to you is a holistic framework for thinking this through, rather than just embarking upon using BIM or using AI. Why not we think more holistically about a paradigm or a framework or an operating system and bring all of these trends and technologies together in a much more systematic fashion? So that's sort of the overview of the Construction 4.0 framework. So then my first question, which was, how do we change the way we design, construct, and produce? So really, we need to take a very product-oriented approach, what I call productization. So let's say we're looking at this very simple, affordable housing block. During design itself, why can't we take a more product-oriented approach rather than designing something and then figuring out what the construction means and methods of that would be. Why can't we upfront utilize a product oriented or a productization approach and think of building in terms of modules that can be repeated not only on this project, perhaps it can be produced and used across projects. And that's the approach called productization. Some parts and some learnings from productization can be used in our sector. One of the techniques that the manufacturing sector utilizes, you can take of shipbuilding, you can take of car manufacturer, they all utilize this productization or a product-oriented approach. To drive the design in a product-oriented setting, we use something called design for manufacture and assembly. So while you're designing, you're thinking about construction, you're thinking about operation, maintenance, renewal. So our architects who are already at the forefront of use of technology and using innovative thinking could also start thinking in a product-oriented manner and think of modules rather than go down to the sticks and bricks approach. Why not think of products that can be utilized? You can think of these products, and I know one of the challenges in India would be remote. So you can think of these products which could be 2D or volumetric, even in terms of transportation, because while I was working with Shailesh in India, one of the challenges was that the infrastructure to do off-site and do prefabrication, even near site in terms of the road network may not exist. So think in terms of transportation while you are designing, even in a product-oriented approach. So if you had a simple building like this, could this be exploded into parts that can be manufactured either on site, near site, or off site and then assembled? I'm not saying 100% of the building could be that way, but perhaps we can start increasing what we call the pre-manufacture value of this building, the percentage of the building or the infrastructure. Can it be increased? Let's say today we use 10% products, can we increase it to 50%, 75% from a kit of parts, from a productization approach? Can that be accomplished? And if so, would that change how we design, construct, and fabricate? So if this is the building, this is a project that we did with Gale, where we looked at one of their pigging stations and came up with this idea of designing with products, designing for manufacture and assembly. So you can look at various parts that could possibly be standardized, not all, again, not 100%, but some of it could be modularized, could be productized, and we could shift the way we design, construct, and fabricate. We could even look at flooring and roofing components rather than just looking at walls. You could look at volumetric, you can look at 2D, so panels and other kinds of components. But I think that thinking must be gelled with the way we currently design. So a designer pushing down the road the means and methods of construction, we need to bring that up front and design for manufacture and assembly. You can then also, in this productization approach, also design the portion that will take place on the construction site. So let's assume we came up with 80% of the building that could be manufactured on site. You can also design the in situ assembly of those components. So in this new way of looking at how we design and construct, you can also practically look at the ways of assembling on site in a much more efficient fashion. And this is something that's already happening. It's not that this is something new. You look at in Australia, the Ministry of Education or the school infrastructure in the New South Wales, working with two leading companies globally, Mace, you may have all heard of them. They're doing a lot of innovative things, have come up with a platform essentially of products that can go into a school building. We know school buildings, very crucial. The design of the school building has an impact on the learning and kids' outcomes in terms of their behavior, in terms of their growth and learning. So could we possibly look at school buildings and come up with a platform of products, very much like a platform of products that a car manufacturer or a shipbuilder uses today? If you go to a shipbuilding yard in South Korea, they don't design every piece, every part for a ship. It's already sitting in a product database, and they can configure, combine, assemble, bring all of these assemblies together to come up with a unique, customized ship for, let's say, an oil tanker or for a cruise ship. So could we similarly adopt those design for manufacturer and assembly principles and come up with a product platform from which you can, for a new school building, you can derive these parts and put them together into a really uniquely designed school building. So that's sort of the approach in construction 4.0 that we feel is crucial. So another example, this is the UK government, and they are also doing platforms, product platforms. You can have product platforms for various types of buildings. I think the applications there is for the Ministry of Justice or Department of Justice for various prisons, jails, and those kinds of buildings. They're working with housing to come up with a product platform. So this is an example of product platforms that can be standardized, which can be combined to create sub-assemblies, and these sub-assemblies can go into buildings and other types of infrastructure to produce assets, built assets that we really want to look at. So what I'm really sharing with you today is three things: a product orientation or productization, a platform-based approach. So could we look for a subsector within construction? In this particular case, could we look at affordable housing and come up with a platform of products? I call it a physical platform from which we can take those parts and come up with unique housing solutions in which the entire process has been thought through from manufacture to assembly to construction, and perhaps even beyond in terms of occupancy, how the asset will behave over its entire life cycle. And and thirdly, DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly. Very important. If we were to shift towards a product-oriented approach, could we possibly look at DFMA as a principle that can be utilized in changing how we construct or fabricate? So the second question that I had asked, or the second transformation that I had laid out for you, was how do we better build digital tools and how do we better use them in our design construction process? So I think digital tools together can help us solve many of the inefficiencies and productivity drops that we have in our sector. All of you have seen, and India has made significant progress in the use of building information modeling. Building information modeling combined with a cloud-based common data environment, which is available to various project team members, makes the design and construction process efficient. And today, the discussion has shifted to the use of digital twins. And there's sort of a top of the mind, flavor of the month kind of situation, and everyone is talking about digital twins. These digital tools together can be utilized by our sector to bring about horizontal, vertical, and longitudinal integration. Think of it in very simple terms. Today, data and information in design and construction does not flow over the life of the project. Many a times, design information is inefficiently passed over to the construction phase, and then very inefficiently in the handover process from the construction phase to the use phase of the built asset. So if we utilize digital tools in the right way, we can integrate uh, across the life cycle steps of a built asset. Similarly, you will also know that there is a lot of information and data loss, what now many people have started calling dark data. There is this data that is used and not used again. So because of our inefficient ways of working, we have some of that happening, information and data loss. When it comes to information being passed between project team members, from owner to the architect to the designer to the engineer to the constructor and the supply chain, vendors, subcontractors, and suppliers, and then over to the use phase, again, members like a facility manager or an asset manager. So with the appropriate use of digital tools, we could perhaps create an integration where the information and data loss is reduced and the information sharing becomes much more efficient. We also have this longitudinal fragmentation where we don't learn from projects. Many a times, lots of information and data is generated on a project, which is then copied and stored somewhere, even electronically, and perhaps wisdom that you can gain from those past projects is not very holistically utilized in future projects. And that's what, again, the definition of dark data is. So can we utilize digital tools and other mechanisms within this digital platform to get rid of vertical, horizontal, and longitudinal fragmentation in our sector? So in this approach where we answer this question, and how do we develop and use digital tools, or how do we in construction 4.0 transform the way we use digital technologies, I strongly believe it can happen if we take on fully the model centric and data centric way of working. You must already have heard BIM it and then build it. So now people have started saying BIM it, twin it, and then build it. But again, the point is take on a model-centric worldview in various work practices and processes that we adopt. But then more importantly, start valuing data. There is so much data that we generate, and a recent study suggested that 95% of the data we generate on projects we don't use. So it becomes into that dark data. We need to rethink how we use data, how we create digital assets, meaning how do we create those drawings, BIM models, as-builts, and other things. These are really digital assets that need to be valued. Those can be coupled with digital twins, and then we can deliver physical assets or built assets in a much better fashion. So when it comes to the use of digital tools and technologies, I think we need to think about model-centric and data-centric way of working. Many of you must have come across this term, digital twins. This is sort of the flavor of top of the mind for everyone. Essentially, what we are now seeing on many large and complex projects is the use of what's used to be called the cyber physical systems, or what is now called digital twins, which essentially takes your physical asset, your built asset, and connect it bi-directionally in both directions with a cyber model or a digital model or a BIM model, so that you can receive through a sensing layer, an IoT layer, you can receive signals, data, information directly from the physical asset. So if something moved in your physical asset, you could sense it and provide that information to the BIM model and see that movement. And based on that movement, if you wanted to make any change in the physical asset, you can have a human make a decision. That decision can be fed back into the cyber or the virtual model or the BIM model, and some actuation layer can be utilized to have an action on the physical model. So that's a rough definition of digital twins, a physical and cyber loop in both directions, receiving information from the construction site onto a BIM model or any other virtual representation. It could be a 2D model, and then making a decision and actioning some action in the physical layer is the definition of digital twins. Now, we can utilize digital tools in the overall construction 4.0 framework, which I previously explained in a productized approach. You can use brilliantly BIM models and other digital tools and technologies to support the product orientation that we discussed. So these two, that is, how do we improve our design and construction process, and how do we develop and use digital tools, goes hand in hand. So the two work together and provide you with the much needed change for the sector. So here I'm giving an example of essentially a BIM model in which you can see products, and these products have been stored in a database and can be used extensively in the design process. So digital tools used appropriately will support the new way of designing and constructing. Here's another example of how these digital tools come into play when you are designing and perhaps even constructing. As we saw in products, there is this idea of product platforms. You saw how the Australian province of New South Wales is looking at education sector or school buildings and using product or physical platforms to improve the design construction process. The same can be done in digital world also. So you can produce digital platforms and ecosystems that can help the way we develop and use digital tools. Think of this as your Uber, or think of this as your Apple iOS or your Android phone. The phone comes with an ecosystem or a digital platform. The iOS today has many add-ons available to you. So if today, for example, I'm an iPhone user and I wanted to monitor my heart rate, I can buy a physical add-on, I can buy an app, and I can extend the digital tool, which is my iPhone and the iOS, to do that very thing for me. And that's, if you think about it, it's a platform where a developer can go develop a physical add-on and an app, which is a digital add-on, over that platform and deliver products and benefits for the end user or the consumer. The same approach can be applied in design and construction also. We can utilize digital platforms and ecosystems for the construction sector as well. So, and many of this is already happening. Many of you would have come across the Autodesk Forge platform or the Procore marketplace. These are places where no longer you have to worry about creating a specific application for your own organization. So let's say you're a construction company and you are interested in an app that will help you monitor your construction workers and deploy COVID-19 labor planning on your job sites. You don't have to go and really develop this digital product or digital tool from ground zero, from scratch. You can utilize the existing platforms available to you. For example, the Autodesk Forge platform, which exposes the BIM model. So rather than having an app without a visual interface, you can have a BIM model in your app with great ease because you have access to this platform and an ecosystem. Using APIs and software development kits and application programming interfaces, you can get the BIM model into your app with much ease. So you can talk to a third-party developer to give you this app where you can then create very specific your own app in which you can do things that you want to do on your construction projects. So here I'm using the example of a COVID-19 labor planning app, which ties to a variable sensor-based tracking tool and gives you the data that you need in this app to better manage your labor planning and labor deployment on a construction site. So the physical platform, the product platforms work hand in hand with digital platforms and ecosystems to provide you with the benefits that you're looking for when it comes to the deployment of digital tools and technologies for your projects. Lastly, we raised the third question: how can we improve, change the way we procure and deliver? Because no matter how much innovation you can do in the design and construction in the use of digital technologies, if you can't procure these innovative ideas into your projects, it's going to be very challenging. I think along with the sticks and bricks approach, the lowest bidder or the lowest first cost regime must also change. We need to rethink how we can change the way we procure and deliver on our projects today. Today, we do it in a very transactional fashion, an approach that is a very adversarial, causes many of the inefficiencies that we discussed early on because of the very win-lose adversarial approach that we currently have in transactional ways of working. This can be shifted into enterprise models where you have much more collaboration and coordination. I know it is difficult to implement on public sector projects. You have various procurement guidelines, perhaps laws and regulations that may make it difficult, but that should not be the barrier to making improvements to the way we procure and deliver. Obviously, we progress from enterprise model to a lean delivery model to a much more integrated project delivery model where you look at value, you look at the whole of life, you look at the whole of asset rather than a very microscopic view of let's get it designed, whatever is the quality of the design, let's get it constructed, and then have so many inefficiencies and waste in the process that you've lost the very benefits that you may have gained for procuring in a very regulated regime. So I think some thinking is needed, but obviously this is perhaps very challenging and difficult to accomplish, but doesn't mean that we can't bring in best practices and learnings into this. And some of this is already happening as part of my day job. My colleagues in the UK are working towards a toolkit which has been launched, in fact, called Procuring for Value. So rather than procuring for cost, can we procure for value? Can, in the initial stages, we can take an outcome-based procurement approach to drive our capital program delivery and the lifetime performance of the assets? Can we increase transparency on the performance of the suppliers and assets? Can we improve procurement efficiencies and get the basics right? So in this particular case, and this has now changed slightly, when you're setting up a large capital program, especially in the public sector, could there be a weighting system where you can look at all aspects just rather than just looking at the financial aspects? So could you look at the natural, social, human, and manufactured capitals also rather than just looking at the money? Could we look at ways of procuring in which carbon, resource use, production, and productivity are all optimized rather than just looking at the first cost of the design construction process? So that's sort of what I mean when I say how we procure and deliver needs to change also. There are many best practices already in place. There are models such as progressive design and build, and others that can be utilized to make improvements in the procurement and the delivery process. So I'm going to I know we had lost some time in the beginning, so I sped up, and we probably may end up a little bit late, but not a whole lot late. What I want to do is leave enough time at the end for us to have maybe a dialogue, a discussion, or a Q&A session. So my final, really the message is that our sector probably needs to fire on these three cylinders, these three verticals: product transformation, delivery transformation, and digital transformation. From a stick-built construction, we need to shift to modular, prefab, offsite to a fully industrialized construction. So that transformation will be helped by product platforms. On the right pillar, you will see digital transformation. Our work practices were largely non-model based. So we had sort of digitized, rather than drawing on a piece of paper, we know how to draw using a computer. But we need to shift that to model-based, integrated model-based, and then cyber-physical technologies that are integrated with other digital technologies. The digital transformation would be helped by digital platforms. And I took a stab at where we are as a sector. This is that dotted line, the pink line that you see, is my view where we are at in terms of a sector. We already are looking at prefab, offsite. We are already discussing lean delivery and adopting some good practices from lean in our delivery processes. We've already accomplished model-based, BIM-based, CDE-based work practices, moving towards an integrated model-based. So if you think about it, the journey remaining is really to do with product platforms, digital platforms, and integrated project delivery. But the more challenging thing is the horizontal interlinks between these three layers. So there's no point in progressing in the product transformation vertical to an industrialized construction or a construction 4.0 approach if you have not brought together, uplifted the way we procure and deliver, and have not really transformed the way we do things digitally. So that's something that's very crucial and is sort of paints the bigger picture of industrialized construction and construction 4.0. Because remember, from the very beginning, I said we need to change how we design, construct, procure, design, construct, fabricate, how we do digital, and how we procure and deliver. So we need to make these three transformations in more or less in sync or in tandem. If you want to read more from some of the things that I've discussed, you can buy our book on Amazon called Construction 4.0, where we discuss many of these things in much more details, 526 pages to be precise. It's readily available on Amazon as an ebook. If you need to get more information, feel free to reach out to me. And I think with that, I am going to pause and see if anyone has any comments, feedback, questions, or if you want to throw any rocks or stones at me.
Dr. Soni, is it possible to conduct the short 2 polls which you had shared with us?
Yes.
Before we go for Q&A? All right, I'm launching the first poll right now.
Excellent, yes, thank you. And that will help us build some questions as well. So you will be seeing a poll on your screens. I'd really like to know where you are at in your journey, in your organization, where you're working. Only about 20% of you voted, so I would like to get more responses. We'll keep the poll open for a few more seconds. Very encouraging results, which we are going to share with you. Please do respond. We're picking up speed here, close to 30%. I'd like to go as close to 70% as possible. Okay, we're approaching 50%. So, Deepal, do you want to, whenever you're ready, you can shut down the poll and we can share the results.
Yeah, so these are the results of the poll.
Okay, so I guess 33% of you are already using innovative materials and technologies, which is very, very promising. 31% of you have responded that you've started taking the first steps towards implementing these technologies. 20% are aware but currently not planning to launch the use of innovative materials and technologies, which is a very promising sign. So we're looking at close to 85% of the respondents already utilizing some of these technologies. That's brilliant. About 16% of you are not familiar. I'm so glad. Thank you, Ultratech, for doing these challenges and these competitions and bringing speakers and giving voice to some of the folks that are trying to push these technologies. So thank you very much for that. Maybe we can now do the second poll. So the second question really digs a little bit deeper, and your response will be greatly appreciated. What are some of the barriers, blockers, obstacles to the use of innovative materials and technologies? Is it the cost? It is lack of availability of support from vendors? Many responses, so you'll have to think a little bit carefully on this one. 36% of you have already voted. Again, we'll target about 50% responses. Okay, people, please go ahead, share the results. This is brilliant. Do you know why? Because when I ran these polls earlier, several years ago, the first thing that'll come up as a reason or a blocker or an obstacle or a barrier would be high first cost, both direct and hidden costs, which has changed. 55% of the respondents from you are saying that really the challenge is complexity due to lack of information and training, which is amazing because that first blocker that we used to have, I'm not going to adopt anything new because the costs are high, has really gone down. It's to number 2. I wish it was further down, but at least 29% compared to 55%. So 55% rank complexity as number 1. 29% high costs, 24% no demand or financial incentive from clients, 16% lack of support from vendors. So, and again, very encouraging to see Ultratech taking this initiative and overcoming some of these obstacles and barriers that we may have. Okay, so with that, I once again like to thank all of you for attending. It's Friday evening for you. You could be doing many other things. So thanks for sparing the time. I'm open to any questions, comments that you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleh, for a wonderful presentation. As a matter of fact, as we have been talking about construction 4.0, I mean sticks and bricks versus construction 4.0. Here in Ultratech, we are trying also to bring in those 3 transformations: product, delivery, and digital. In the product front, we are trying to add on to the basket, add new products, address new customer pain points. In delivery, we are improving on the logistics, trying to reach out to the last mile. And on the digital front, we are having some of the systems now, integrated systems based on building information modeling. One of them is UTech, which is very well known. Now, this point which you came out with, that we can start by improving the productivity in the construction area. We can improve the productivity, save the cost by 1.6 trillion US dollars. That's absolutely mind-boggling. And Asia Pacific alone can save up to 440 billion USD annually with the right intervention. I mean, that shows a lot of pathway for the future. Obviously, and there is no doubt that sticks and bricks approach has to change for further modernization. And of course, I think this is the only way to address the other major issue, that is the global housing challenge. Obviously, how we design, construct, fabricate, how we go digital, how we bring in the transformation. I feel that everyone who have been attending this wonderful lecture of Dr. Sane, it's up to us to think and introspect. IndiaNext challenge That's our theme, that's our purpose, brilliantly poised to take us to the next level. Dr. Soni mentioned about the COVID challenges. The on-site productivity dropped by 11 to 20%. There were drop in supply chain, material prices increased, a lot of challenges. But I think all of us have proved to be agile, face the situation, and take the next steps. We have been very agile, and we need to continue with this agility and adoption of digital technology. He has been talking about the AI, artificial intelligence decision making, virtual inspection that happens in the US through the laser scanner 360-degree view. But all these things are absolutely, something we are stepping into. 2050, there will be no human in construction site. I mean, that's again, it sounds like a sci-fi, but I think it's absolutely possible. There will be, and we have already started experiencing remote working, robot applied, new operating systems. Like for instance, I can tell the team we have started the digital site advisory or construction advisory. I think that's the first step towards remote working, addressing the construction sites remotely. Of course, we need to move a lot of way ahead. Transformation, paradigm shift, construction 4.0 is a paradigm shift. Adapt what other industries do. And he has been talking about very uh, uh, very much on the IoT, Internet of Things, digital layers, physical layer, digital layer, building info models to create interconnected environment, integrating organizational procurement and information on efficiently design, construct, and operating assets. I think all these things I have noted down that shows us that gives us a new roadmap. He has talked about 3D manufacturing automation, usage of digital tools like AR, artificial reality, virtual reality. I think we are all familiar with the VR now, the big data, and of course, cloud-based tools. Construction 4.0 framework, models and data-centric levels. Digital BIM, that is building information modeling, which we are all familiar with now, cloud-based data. So that, I think, and of course IoT, that will be the next step in our business, in our industry. It has to be something which touched me very deeply was the product-oriented approach in the construction sector, like the shipbuilding or the car manufacturing. I had been to China and to Europe and have experienced the 3D, the 3D modeling and stuff, technologies like that. So I have had some idea about, the product-oriented approach. 3D printing in construction was something which I'm aware of, but now I get more sense into this aspect. Design for manufacturing and assembly, product-oriented approach in 4.0 is very crucial. Dr. Soni has mentioned. Product platforms for various types of buildings that can be created. That's very interesting. Create some assemblies and built. Productization, platform-based approach, which can be used for the huge housing demand in the area of affordable housing. Physical platforms, manufacture, assembly, and construct and design. DFMA, he has talked about design for manufacturing for assembly, DFMA, which again makes a very good sense. So all these things, he has also touched upon the digital twins, horizontal, vertical, longitudinal integration in the space. How do we integrate? How do we address info and data losses? He has talked about the dark data. 95% of the data that is available, it's basically a data overload, which is not used. So how do we make use of it? I was really enthralled when he talked about BIM it, twin it, build it. Model-centric and data-centric approach. Obviously, it will have a very integrated approach as we move forward. He talked about the digital twins, which is the cyber physical systems. So all these things, I think we, our entire team, we have taken it and we see a very good way forward in the future. So without wasting any more time, I think we can open this for some Q&A. So may I now request our Senior Vice President Technical, Mr. Ashwin Moge, to take the Q&A. Ashwin, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Satyaki, and thank you, Dr. Anil Swane, for indeed interesting talk for enhancing the speed in the construction and with the theme Build with the Speed. And of course, you have explained it very nicely about the approach and the three transformations needed. So there are a lot of questions what you have talked about, the three transformations needed, that is product transformation, delivery transformation, and digital transformation. So there are, and first of all, I would like to tell you that the audience has given, it is a very nice presentation and it's a quite advanced tool to use it for the speedy construction. So we'll take some questions. Now, the question is first is, how we ensure the concrete QA/QC in modular or precast construction, what you talked about, and even in the construction industry with 4.0 approach. That's what on the offsite construction, one speaker has asked this question.
First of all, Mr. Sarkar, I think that was an excellent summary of what I presented. I'm so delighted that you could literally walk through every step. The only thing I would want to add is, yes, none of this is new except the idea that we should look at it in a combined and integrated fashion, and which you also brought out very nicely. So thank you for excellent summary.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
To this question, I think that's very, very important. The general perception is that if you shift anything to a factory floor, the quality improves. I don't know if there's a scientific study to show that in construction, but I would agree with that general sentiment that anything done in situ, probably the chances of things going wrong are higher than if you were to bring it into a controlled environment. Remember, when we use the term manufacturing and factory, we're not saying build a huge factory somewhere. It could be actually in a truck. It could be a mobile factory which can be moved from site to site. It could be on site. It can be near site, and all those things. So in terms of QA, QC, I think the single most benefit the precast, prefab, concrete technologies can utilize is the use of IoT devices embedded in the various products, panels, volumetric products that we produce. So sensors, RFID tags, and other kinds of IoT devices will greatly benefit real time. It's not that you're waiting for data or results to come. You can get real time, what they call edge computing data, meaning really from the work phase, you can get data to monitor. So our sampling, our statistical control techniques, all of that can be really benefit from this these sensors and IoT devices or the IoT layer. I think with the abundance of data that's available, we can do analysis, apply AI, and figure out where things, if they are going wrong, where they are going wrong, so that we can apply those learnings on the same project and other projects, future projects that we do. So I'm very positive that concrete technologies would benefit from the overall Industry 4.0, Construction 4.0 framework.
Right.
Right. There is another question. Do you think the Indian construction sector is ready to adopt the approach described in your presentation? And we already asked it in your poll, and we got some kind of an indication that. But what is your view on that?
I think India helps build the BIM models of the world. Right, you will see in Gurgaon and other parts, in Pune and other parts of the country, you have the modeling teams that are doing many projects in Boston, in DC, all over the US, all over the world, in UK. So we have the digital expertise and and the wherewithal to do this. Already things are happening. It's not that we don't have exemplars in India of this approach. Many airports, for example, are moving in the direction, Indian airports moving in the direction of using digital twins, because it makes sense. If you can monitor what's going on in a built asset and take quick action, people will embrace that. I think through PMAY or Housing for All program, we have made significant strides in construction technology, use of materials. The concrete and cement industry in India is very mature, probably in the top few in the world. So all those ingredients are there. Perhaps the one area which is extremely passionate for me is improving our educational system, improving our training programs,
Yes.
better prepare the workforce for this change. I don't think as an industry or a sector we do enough to make those improvements, those changes. We still produce traditional architects and civil engineers who perhaps should be taught about all these aspects. I know BMTPC, Dr. Shailesh Agarwal started this certification program in advanced housing technologies. Why can't more be done in civil engineering programs, in architectural programs, in construction engineering and management programs in India? Means I started a program in India, which is construction project management program with the help of colleagues and our organization RICS to bring about some of these changes. If we are going to do more and more manufacturing and more productization approach, how do we cost this? How do we project manage this? How do we look at the supply chain? All of that needs to be now brought into the curriculum. So one area perhaps where we could possibly consider ourselves weak would be this education and training. Other aspects I'm not willing to accept that we are weak in any way. I think there is skills, there is competencies within the existing workforce to embrace this. Perhaps the other aspect could be we need informed clients. We probably want to bring owners and clients that are very progressive and want to push these paradigms, operating systems, and technologies into the sector.
Yeah. Sir, there are a lot of attendees who are attending it online, as well as people are at various locations. They are attending it in a group. So we are receiving the questions from all over the country, from east, west, north, south zone. We call it as from there. So this is a question which is coming again from a very normally bothering question, that if the build with speed will affect the quality of construction. What you are talked about, whether when we are talking about build with speed, will it affect the quality of construction? That is coming in mind of one person who has asked this question from South.
I will disagree with that. It will not, because just don't read the words. Don't read build with speed. Read it in a way where it's intended. If you read the entire competition brief, which I have done, not whole document, but I've done, it talks about very holistic changes in the way we design and construct, right? Build with speed will incorporate the best practices, and that would be the winning entry who takes care of, for example, sustainable development goals, will take care of quality, will take care of the well-being and safety of workers, will make sure there is no waste, make sure there is no rework. So build with speed is an anchor which connects to all other dimensions within the competition, within what we do as a sector. So speed is connected to cost, speed is connected to enhancing quality, speed is connected to people, speed is connected to not only construction technology, but also digital technologies. So I find within those three words to be very powerful message being sent to a calling for architects and engineers to embrace this holistic view and make something that will meet all those dimensions. Many a times our sector is said to be a laggard, we are behind. I disagree. I think we solve complex challenges. What you build as a sector, as a professional, is so complex. It solves real world problems, housing problems, transportation problem, and energy distribution problem, water, wastewater related issues. So I think we need to take it in a much more holistic fashion and fire on all cylinders, as I say. Great quality, great speed, affordable, hitting the sustainable development goals, and so on.
There is a next question from the North Zone that the cost of innovative materials and building technologies is high. How can we convince the project owners to adapt?
I think that is really a very important question. But again, as I said, today in the poll, vast majority of you did not rank that as the number one barrier. Because anytime, let's say 10 years ago, if I spoke to the construction sector, the first question was, it's going to be more expensive, so therefore we don't want to adopt it. I think cost is something that you need to very carefully analyze. First of all, what are you comparing it with? The current traditional approach has so much waste that the final outturn cost or the final actual cost is actually much higher than the estimated cost that you were comparing with. So today we say the traditional way of building housing is cheaper. Actually, it is not, because it wastes, quality issues come up, if we have delays. So if a end user, a home buyer, is delayed by a year, what's that cost? It should be added when we do the comparison. When we waste so much material and cause climate change issues, is that cost incorporated in that comparison? So the newer ways of working, the innovative technologies, advanced materials, actually address all these problems. So in order to do a fair comparison, we should not just look at the first cost. We should look at the life cycle cost and then do the comparison. And you will see that these technologies will come front and turn out to be better if we compare the life cycle cost.
Right. True. Nowadays, life cycle cost analysis is very important, not only the initial cost. There is a next question that is there any standard which is being developed while adopting this particularly approach, whether it is in American standard or European standard or likely to come an Indian standard? That is a question that is to maintain this particularly the approach, what you have said about three approaches or three transformations. So is there any guidelines or code has been prepared?
And there are many international standards that are coming out. So already in place is the ISO 19650, which is becoming a de facto information management and building information modeling standard globally. So ISO 19650 takes care of many aspects of the digital parts. There is an ISO standard coming up for Industry 4.0 and digital twins. So that will again help standardize the way we look at things from not only information management, but from building models and digital twins. There is an international standard that I am involved with that actually does cost management standardization. It's called the ICMS, International Cost Management Standard, that standardizes the way we do life cycle costing and life cycle carbon emissions. So there are many standards. I don't think there can be one standard that can address the industrialized construction 4.0 as a whole. We will have to have connected standards that address various aspects of the construction 4.0. In the UK, for example, in procurement, there are many things that are happening. One would be Project 13. It's called Project 13. That is changing the way we procure and deliver projects. There is procuring for value, that's shifting from first cost to a value-based procurement model. So there are efforts, but it's such a complex problem that you would not solve it with one single standard. You'll have to utilize multiple standards globally, international standards, to address the need.
Right. So there is another question from Eastern Zone, that what you talked about, that construction 4.0 framework, it is applicable for a new construction, or it is also applicable for repair and retrofitting, which is also a major activity, construction activity?
I think that's a fascinating, a very interesting question. when we think about construction, we always think greenfield, but there's so much that will happen. We've already built such a large building stock and infrastructure assets that we need to look at retrofits, renewals, and rehabs. And yes, so these principles can also be utilized in brownfield projects or in renewal, rehab, and retrofit projects.
Okay. So there is a next question that what role can academia play in using innovative material and building technology, what you mentioned in your presentation? Especially, what is the role of academia which they can play in the Indian context?
I think you should go read the Times of India article last year by the IIT Guwahati director, clearly laying the foundation for what the academia needs to do. How many? I know many students will be in attendance. How many of you are taught AI and machine learning, perhaps in civil engineering? How many of you are taught thinking about life cycle analysis or product-based approach, or look at DFMA, design for manufacture and assembly, or study the shipbuilding industry to understand how they build ships? I think the answer would be not many. So without the education pipeline being created, I think the transformation will not succeed. So it's a very significant role academia needs to play in this.
Right. So there is one question that what is more elaboration is required. That is, what is the model-centric world view and what is dark data? What you are referred into that. So can you elaborate on this a little bit more?
Sure. So a model-centric view would, a simple example, use a model to quantify, to come up with a bill of quantities. Use the model to do other work practices such as supply chain information. So within your model, if you have an air handling unit, get the manufacturer to give the data that can go into the model so that everyone has access to it. So model centric is a way of working which is not 2D, which is not paper based. It's a model that is used to do your work practices. Every project team member does their own processes and practices. So you may be doing engineering calculations, you may be doing quantity takeoff. In model centric way of working, your work practices are driven by the model. You take information, do your work, and provide the information back into the model. And data centric way, data has been used to deliver projects from, I guess, time when time began. You cannot deliver project without data. But do we value data? Do we create a spreadsheet, solve a problem today, and just forget about it? And that's called dark data. So the data centric or data driven approach of working is that everything we do, we derive the data, historical data, current data, and then make decisions based on the evidence that is provided by the data. So rather than having siloed data sitting somewhere, we have shared connected data that is utilized by the entire project team, by the project, and by the organizations themselves to make evidence-based decisions.
Sir, this question is from Central Zone, and in the Indian context, that is construction industry employ a lot of laborers, and it gives more wages, or rather opportunity for the wages, earning wages for the people on the ground. So with this, when we call it as a if you build fast, with this construction 4.0, so will we need less construction labor? So whether the laborers will become jobless? So that is a question.
I think that's a very interesting question. There are a lot of papers written on will robotics and automation eat our jobs? I don't think so, because you're shifting the labor requirement into a much more controlled environment, thereby improving the working conditions, the workplace conditions for these workers, providing them with better tools, better training, and a better environment to work. So in fact, it benefits all the workers. And I'll give you an example here from the US. There's an initiative in San Francisco area called Factory OS. Okay. As the name suggests, they want to shift all the construction work into a factory. Guess who's their partner in that initiative? It's the Carpenters Union. So you would think that Carpenter Union would be opposed because they will think that jobs will be lost if automation and factory-based approach is used. But that's actually not the case. So they're partnered and they said, okay, this seems like a great idea. It'll help our members of the union because their working conditions will become safe, health and hygiene would be better, better wages, better working times. You can take annual leave. I think for construction workers to think about taking annual leave is driven by our festivals, but can there be a more structured way of leaves and absences and working conditions for construction workers? So actually, at the end of the day, it is beneficial for the workforce, and I don't see major reductions in workforce requirements if we shift it towards a construction as a manufactured process.
There is one question again on this similar topic, that is there any project which is presently running in India which adopts this construction 4.0 framework, or is it in near future it is planned?
Since you had great examples in India, if you look at all the lighthouse projects
Yes.
that are going on under Housing for All, they take some component of what we are saying here and adopt that. If you take an example of a 3D printed house on IIT Madras campus, that's another example. I know a lot of work has been done on the gypsum fiber reinforced panels in India. There have been a lot of innovations made on the physical or product platform front. A lot of mass housing projects built, maybe like by DDA using some of these advanced technologies. There's a company called Katera, which is US based, now bankrupt, but who was based in India. They were based in India doing a lot of innovative things with product platforms and digital platforms using AI and so on. I know that on the delivery front, IPD has been used on many projects in India. So yes, there are these exemplar projects, but the goal would be to mainstream, make a whole of industry improvement if we were to move in the construction 4.0 direction. And that, I think, is still not there. In fact, it's not there any part of the world. Only few exemplar projects exist.
Sir, here there is another question that can you elaborate on the skill sets required for the product transformation, like all you said about 3 transformations. So the product transformation, delivery transformation, and digital transformation. So what kind of training or skill sets need to be developed for the people and processes?
Sure. So I'm going to do a little bit of self-promotion here. We did a study. So Autodesk and RICS, we have done a study on this called Future of Work in Construction. So if you Google it, you should be able to download that. Essentially, what it says is, let's say in 10 years, we have taken construction 4.0 or industrialized construction, adopted it. What will be the new teams, roles, skills we would need? And in that study, we found that you would need, for example, a chief data officer. You will need a data scientist in a design and construction firm, right? A person who knows how to manage, curate, handle data. So there's a clearly coming wave of data scientists in the construction sector. Another role would be a manufacturing role, a person who understands DFMA, a person who knows what is designed for manufacture and assembly. We do constructability analysis, but if we shift towards a product-based approach, you will need folks who are an expert in design for manufacture and assembly, and maybe even design for manufacture, assembly, operation, maintenance, and end of life or recycle. Uh, so those were the two roles. Then we had actually an innovation and integration leader person. Remember, I've been saying many times that we sometimes get into one silo, which could be advanced materials and technologies, and we consider those extensively, adopt them. But here, what we are suggesting is if you're going to adopt, let's say, a precast concrete volumetric approach, make sure that you bring along your digital tools to support that also. Make sure you think about delivery processes also to ensure. So you need integration, you need innovation. So one of the roles was innovation and integration leader. Now, more detailed skill sets, we have it in that report. We have ranked them by importance. So robotics, mechatronics, automation, learning to fly a drone, for example, learning to download data from a 360-degree camera and a laser scanner and be able to do the analysis. So those roles are listed in our report. I'll be happy to share those, or you can search that report and see the new skills, competencies, roles, and teams needed for Construction 4.0.
So, sir, there are few more questions, but with what we'll do, we'll take two more questions. One question is that when you are talking about the delivery transformation, and indeed you mentioned about lean delivery. So what is meant by lean delivery? Asker is asking or requesting to have elaboration on lean deliveries.
Sure. So the Lean Construction Institute and now the Indian Lean Construction group that is working so extensively, and they just had their conference, I think, last week. They have something called LPDS, Lean Project Delivery System, which is actually very closely aligned to the way Construction 4.0 works. So essentially looking at your teams adopting lean principles in the delivery process, looking at the supply chain, looking at assembly, looking at on-site processes, and infusing lean principles into those and coming up with a delivery system that utilizes that is essentially a lean delivery system.
Okay. There is one more question. This is the last questions we are taking it, and there are a few more questions which will pass it on to you, and you can give replies to us, and we'll forward it to them. The question is this particularly Construction 4.0 framework, is it applicable more relevant to the building systems, or it can be for the infrastructure projects like metro, airport, ports and harbors, and other construction activities other than the building systems?
So the short answer is both to horizontal and vertical projects. So buildings as well as civil engineering or infrastructure projects. If you look at what's happening in the UK infrastructure sector has also come up with a product platform report. You can do a search. It's called Platform DFMA. That report shows how DFMA and productization can be applied for infrastructure sector or civil engineering projects as well. So broadly, the answer is yes for both buildings and for infra projects. It's much easier to visualize and talk about for the building sector, but I think it applies to both.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Anil, and I will request Royston to take it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very enriching session, and I would like to thank Dr. Swani for taking time to come and speak at this webinar and sharing with us the framework to build an efficient process, enlightening our audiences with the technological megatrends and indeed making this second series very, very enriching for our participants. I would also like to thank Mr. Satyaki Sarkar and Mr. Ashwin Moge for being the voice of this fraternity and taking forward the proceedings and conveying to the audience the objective of this entire webinar. Um, Thank you to our audiences too, for making time to attend this session. The double header series surely kept this promise, though we were not able to get Sailesh Agrawal, but I'm sure we will try and get some kind of a recorded session from him and post it on our website. I think this has been a super buzzing evening and a very high engaging participation. I'm sure Mr. Moge has a lot of questions, but with respect to
Paucity of
time,
time, yeah.
we will restrict it. However, for those who have unanswered questions, please share your questions to us on email at info@ultratechindianext.com. Dr. Anil has mentioned to me yesterday that he will try and address all those unanswered questions and ensure that all of you get your responses. We will have this recorded session of the webinar on our website in the next 72 hours for those who have missed it, so that you can once again see what was conveyed in this entire webinar. I hope all of you had a very informative and constructive evening, and we at IndiaNext were able to fulfill our jobs, and we at Ultratech were able to fulfill our jobs as thought leaders. I would like Mr. Sarkar to say the final closing words, and then Mr. Anil to conclude and close this evening. Yeah. Your audio is mute, Mr. Sarkar.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
I think this session was a session for the future, for the tomorrow. And I think we are all aligned towards that, towards getting in that transformation. We are already in the journey in products, in our deliverables, in our solutions, everywhere. I mean, so I think it's a very good start off for all of us present and who have attended this program. And what I could see, we could see a lot of value. Like he said, Dr. Sawhney said, procuring for value rather than procuring for cost. I mean, that's again, that will make the transformation.